So let me just get started here by saying a little bit about why I'm doing this. I've found Pluto transits to be incredibly different, or sorry, incredibly difficult, probably different as well, personally. And for some of my clients, not all of my clients. And I think Pluto is a little bit of a boogeyman that we don't all understand that well, partly because we haven't worked with Pluto for that long. And so what I'd like to do here is give us a little bit of depth and feeling for what Pluto is, who Pluto is, how Pluto acts, and how we can work with this planet as well. So the picture here, we'll get a little bit more detail about this in a bit. This is a picture of Kali, the Hindu goddess Kali. I took this picture when I was in India, and we're going to talk quite a bit about who she is because she's one of the feminine faces of Pluto. But first, I want to start with what Pluto is just from a plain astronomy point of view. So Pluto was actually predicted as early as 1915, but it was discovered, quote unquote, in 1930. And I should say that Pluto was predicted much, much earlier by some astrologers, but they didn't know exactly what they were predicting. So it was discovered in 1930, and Pluto is the only planet that was named by an 11-year-old girl. And her grandfather was in contact with and worked with some of the astronomers that were involved with Pluto's discovery. And she suggested to her grandfather that the planet should be named Pluto because of its dark and gloomy nature, the quote that I saw. Pluto is different. It rotates backwards like Venus and Uranus both do, and also on its side as Uranus does. And Pluto has a very elliptical and what you might call chaotic orbit, about 248 years it takes to go around the zodiac. And one of the things that you find when you read a little bit is that astronomers actually cannot predict Pluto's position in the sky if you go out far enough. Now that's a long ways out in terms of time, but they can't always predict where Pluto is going to be. So all of these things, I think, contribute to its nature and what we can understand about it. Plutonium, the element that's, of course, critical to making nuclear fission bombs, was discovered shortly after Pluto and is actually named after the planet. And of course, that's one of the contexts, the cultural contexts that gives Pluto some of its meanings, according to astrologers, too, is that time period just before the start of the Second World War, the discovery of plutonium, experiments with atomic power, many, many dark and shadowy themes. And then, of course, also the Great Depression. That should give us pause as well, thinking about that in the US. And then the last thing I want to point out about the planet itself is Pluto has a heart. So the pink piece in the center, you can see that there's that pink loop on one side and then a lighter loop on the other. And that's considered Pluto's heart. When NASA finally got close enough to take a picture, I think people were a little bit surprised. And I'd like you to remember that as we go through the presentation, that heart on Pluto. So who is Pluto? We're going to talk about several faces of Pluto. Here, this is a photograph of a carving from the tale of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven. We're going to talk about Pluto in the context of her underworld journey in some detail, but this is a photo of the engraving that shows the underworld with the figure representing Pluto kind of in the center there, and the naked and very unhappy figure to the left representing Inanna. We will talk more about this as well. So several different mythological characters would be useful for trying to understand who Pluto is, both masculine and feminine. The one that obviously I think most of us are familiar with is Pluto himself, the Roman version of Hades, who's the god of the underworld. Hades is the Greek version, and Hades actually translates as the word riches. So Pluto and Hades both have to do with what we find, the wealth that we find underground and associated with death and the underworld. Then, as I was mentioning, Ereshkigal, Inanna's underworld goddess sister in the Sumerian myth of Inanna, is another face of Pluto. And then the other two figures that I would point to as representative of Pluto are Kali and Shiva, both in Hindu mythology. Here's pictures. So on the left, we have a picture of Pluto himself with his three-headed dog Cerberus. And then up on the right at the top, again, a little bit clearer picture of Kali. And then underneath her, Shiva, Lord Shiva. And I want to talk a little bit about Kali and Shiva. In fact, I think I'm going to just go back because those pictures, we can see them both at the same time. But let me just point out this quote first. According to Ramakrishna, one of the sages who wrote extensively or taught extensively about Kali, Kali is the highest symbol of all the forces of nature. So Pluto as the symbol of the forces and the true power of nature, and meaning the full power of nature. And the story of Kali and Shiva that might give us some insight into Pluto is that if you look at the photo of Shiva down on the bottom, that's a statue in Rishikesh, India, again, that I took when I was there. I took the picture when I was there. And Shiva is shown essentially in deep samadhi, in deep bliss and deep meditation. And the fact that his eyes are closed show that he's withdrawn from the world. And Shiva, as the god of destruction and the god of creation in a sense, when he closes his eyes, the symbolism of that is that the world is destroyed. So Shiva's eyes closed means there is no world. There is only the pure potential of life and being. Kali comes into existence in order to wake Shiva up. And what she does, you can't see it very well, you really can't see it from my picture there, but she is standing on top of Shiva. She is dancing on him. And she has a hold of his three-forked scepter. You can see that she's not a sweet and kind goddess. She has a necklace of skulls. She has a skirt made of human body parts. She's holding a skull dripping with blood in one hand and a sword in the other. And it is her job to wake Shiva up and get him to open his eyes so that creation can continue, creation can be born. So Kali, while she's the goddess of destruction, what she destroys is the ego. And what she destroys is attachments. And then what she brings to life is that renewal of the world. And we can see one parallel with some of the other myths that we'll take a look at in that whole sense of balancing dark and light, and also balancing the seasons and bringing the world back to life after a dormant period.